Welcome back, Crystal Warriors, to the Crystarium Network's top 10 list, and I haven't done one of these in quite a while, and I figured I should probably do one. So this time we're going to be talking about the top 10 campaign settings, specifically for tabletop. I'll do another top 10 video game settings later. So this is my list, and as such, you should expect things that you may not agree with, so obviously know that going in. Anyway, the tabletop campaigns, there's a ton of them out there, and to be honest, I don't actually use a lot of them, but the ones that I do use, I do absolutely love. All of these on here are systems that I have played in at least once or twice, and even more down towards the number one parts, I love, like absolutely love those campaign settings. So wherever a campaign setting exists on this top 10 list, it doesn't really necessarily reflect the quality of the game. So there's several factors taken into account here, but pretty much most of all, it's my opinion about all of these. Critical reception, sales figures, yeah, those do come in a little bit. But anyway, enough of all that, let's get right down into the top 10 tabletop campaign settings.
Number 10, Greyhawk.
This is the setting that pretty much started it all, and to be completely transparent, I've never really played in any extent in the proper setting, but its reach throughout D&D history cannot be denied. Even if you haven't played this setting in D&D, I guarantee that you've at least used many elements from it, possibly without even realizing it, as D&D 3rd edition actually pulled a lot of that into just the basic game. But anyway, much of the standard D&D Pantheon originates here in the setting, as does the infamous Mordenkainen, of which so many spells are named. It probably deserves a much higher place on the list, objectively, I guess, if you can even look at something like that, but since I have so little experience with it, it falls here at number 10.
Number 9, Athos.
Another setting that originated in D&D, this setting was formed in the TSR era where hit after hit after hit of campaign settings were being created. This partly actually led to the downfall of TSR due to an oversaturation of campaign settings in the market, but Athos is the default setting for Dark Sun, which is a fantastic departure from the Tolkien-esque races and cultures that we're familiar with. You have cannibalistic halflings, the Gonds that have just completely fled this realm and took divine magic with them. Other magic quite literally destroys the world itself, and it's a large part of why Athos has the charm that it does. It's basically a huge desert because of magic, and there's a ton of other things as well. My personal involvement with this settings comes from D&D 4th edition. I know, it's awful, but I really enjoyed the elves of this setting, the ones that live in the mirages in the desert. I use that all the time for my campaigns. So it's a very awesome setting. If you're looking for something a little bit different than your standard high fantasy, definitely check out Athos. You will not regret it.
Number 8, World of Darkness.
World of Darkness originally comes from White Wolf, and it's the basis of many supernatural campaigns. In fact, the setting is a mirror of Earth, but with a dark supernatural kind of twist. The appeal of this is that many people play themselves and use familiar surroundings to set up a very tangible sense of realism. And as I said before, the setting's a backdrop for one of the many different campaigns that just operate in the World of Darkness, including but not limited to things like Vampire the Masquerade, Mage the Awakening, Werewolf the Apocalypse, Hunter the Reckoning, and a ton more. There was a reboot called The New World of Darkness, which includes a bunch of different aspects with the intention of rebooting the original line with some modifications. This didn't necessarily go over too well with the audience, but it's still, really good in my opinion.
Number 7, Forgotten Realms.
I'm mixed on Forgotten Realms. The setting is set on a continent known as Faerun and was created by Ed Greenwood as a shared universe. It's pretty much the most well-known D&D setting ever, and that actually is a boon as well as a curse for the game, or for the setting I should say. While I do enjoy the setting, it's evolved into a game with so much lore that it's so incredibly difficult to get invested without a long time of dedication to the works, especially if you want to maintain canon as much as possible. Of course, you can pretty much ignore all that and make it your own, but I'm personally a stickler for continuity, so it's just kind of off-putting to me. I know it's kind of my, issue with it, but that's fine. Along with that, you add to the host of deity-like NPCs, and you have a setting that actually feels pretty hard to just implant regular characters in there because of the constant barrage and information and lore and the already well-established heroes. It seems like I'm dogging on the setting a little bit too much, but I have to give it respect. It's the setting that's one of the oldest and fleshed out of any world ever created in this fantasy genre. The setting spawned hundreds and hundreds of novels created, and one of the most iconic characters in fantasy gaming ever, Dritz. Though it's personally not my favorite, it seems to be that it is for many others, as Wizard keeps on adding its support over the years.
Number 6, Planescape.
Here we have Planescape, the setting that technically should be at the top, as it pretty much contains all settings. But those who have played Planescape understand the planescapiness, I guess we'll go with that, of the setting. It basically takes high fantasy and cranks it up to 11. The setting takes place in the Great Wheel that we know from Dungeons & Dragons and essentially normalizes it to a default world, whereas in the traditional game, going into a plane is pretty much only intended for near godlike characters most of the time. Planescape just assumes that this is your default starting home, which, just allows for a normalcy of whatever that means in Planescape. And one of the best parts of Planescape, though, is that you can go to these different planes, these different realms of existence, and experience just an oversaturation of a particular part of high fantasy setting. And with that, I love it. I love the symmetry between all of the planes, and I just can't get enough of it. In fact, my own world is modeled somewhat off of those planes.
Number 5, Nominera.
Alright, we're getting into actually one of the tougher parts of the list, as any of these next 5 settings could have taken any spot from here on out. Nominera is one of the younger settings in the industry, and it was created by Monte Cook Games after his departure from Wizards. He wanted to get away from creating that D&D-esque material, and Nominera uses its own system called the Cypher system, which actually ties directly into the Numenera's campaign setting. And that setting actually is pretty interesting. It's 1 billion, with a B, years in the future, and the game is set in a 9th iteration of a civilization to inhabit Earth, and I'm talking about our Earth. The game is billed as a science fantasy game in a way that you can really run either genre flawlessly. Of course, it uses the magic as technology setting, which Arthur C. Clarke says that sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. That's pretty much what the setting is in a nutshell, and I love it so very much. I urge anyone to go check out this setting. Even if you don't like the system, it's a joy to read.
Number 4, Rochagon.
It just keeps getting harder and harder to write these descriptions leading up to the number 1. They're all so worthy of the title, but Rochagon is one of, if not the most amazingly fleshed out settings that I've ever seen. Just ever. Period. It is a Far Eastern themed setting with 8 or 9 major clans depending on what era you play in. The interconnectedness of the clans, the back and forths, and the history that they've created that's associated with these clans is, in my opinion, rivaled by none, not even Forgotten Realms. Even better is that it has absolutely no kind of anime influence on it. It's a traditional, old-school looking samurai honor nobility type of game. The art is absolutely breathtaking and is worth buying the book specifically for that fact. As of now, Legend of the Five Rings 4th edition has pretty much completely ended, and I love it because I actually own every single hardcover. I fell in love with this system. The books that they put out are masterpieces in and of themselves. Every single one, to me, is just upper echelon of fantastic. I cannot recommend this setting enough. No longer does it take an Eastern theme and relegate it to a simple edition of a classic high fantasy world. This is Eastern, this is noble, this is Rochagon, the game of samurais.
Number 3, Shadowrun.
I got into Shadowrun 5th edition recently, and the system aside, the lore and the setup of the game is such a charming melding of a near-future science fantasy at its best. It's gritty, it's noir, it's elves, it's orcs, and the internet and magic, dragons and corporations, intrigue and espionage. It's amazing. It's set in the year 2075, where magic has flowed back into the world, turning those with dormant genetic material into what we know as elves and dwarves and orcs and trolls and all of that. Then add some cyberpunk to it and you have Shadowrun. You are a Shadowrunner who infiltrates these mega corporations and does the job to make a living. Also, remember, never deal with a dragon.
Number 2, Emberron.
Emberron. I don't really ever have Emberron on my mind like I do these other settings, Numenera, Shadowrun, Rochagon, but that doesn't mean it's not one of my favorites. The reason I like Emberron for what it is that it turned D&D on its head, removing alignment restrictions in a sort of anything goes kind of way. Add some magitech, flying airships, complex guild systems called houses with dragon marks, and a setting in the tenuous piece of a recent war, and you have a masterpiece of a campaign. It's as close as you're going to get to a Final Fantasy feel with D&D, except for my setting, which, I'm not here to promote that, but definitely give Emberron a try. It's so good, and I love every part of it.
Number 1, Crit.
Finally, Kryn from Dragonlance takes the top place as the best setting for me personally. The setting evolved out of a classic adventure for AD&D, and it went on to spawn some of the most beloved novels ever created. In my view, it's on par with the likes of the Star Wars saga or Lord of the Rings. This is a romantic high fantasy adventure with an interesting magic system related to the moon, orbits, and structures. Moreover, the characters and the setting of war drive this adventure, and hey, we have pretty much the de facto most powerful mage in existence in this particular setting. Yeah, I said it, come at me Gandalf and Dumbledore, bring it on. I stand by my statement. Rasslin is the most powerful mage ever. And I can't really go into the reasons why, but definitely read the books. I've lived with all of these characters, Tanis, Rasslin, Lorana, Caramon, Tika, all of them. Reading all of these countless novels all night long. It's such a classic story done in an amazing way, and it's a very easy read. It's something that you can get into without any effort. I could gush over this setting for hours and hours and hours, but I'm going to leave it there. Please, I highly recommend pick up the novel Dragons of an Autumn Sky and begin your journey into Dragonlance. You can thank me later. And well, that's it for my top 10 tabletop campaign settings. Let me know what you think, what your favorite tabletop campaign setting is. Go ahead and like, share, do all that stuff. It helps us out a ton. We're still a super small channel, but we're growing. We're growing pretty good. And if you like all of this tabletop stuff, I really want to point you to our D&D live play, which is my own world that kind of combines D&D and moreover a classic JRPG, let's say Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger, into a what I hope to be fantastic series going forward, and I'm so proud of it. But anyway, you can go to our Patreon, which is in the description below, and donate $1 or $2 if you really want to support this channel going forward. As always, until next time, Crystal Warriors, keep on gaming.